Jamaica is prone to natural disasters such as hurricanes and earthquakes. Did you know in 1988, Hurricane Gilbert blew the roofs off 80% of the country's houses and wrecked the economy? Now in 2023, the government has learned from past experiences and will implement a National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund to assist the country financially in the event of a natural disaster. But how does it work? Hi, I'm Shaquille Rochester Shorter and welcome to Finance Matters. Today, I will be speaking with Mr. Taron Francis, Chief Fiscal Economist in the Economic Management Division at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service about the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow the Ministry of Finance on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and now TikTok to see all the episodes and highlights. Mr. Francis, thank you for coming on our program.
Thank you for having me, Shaquille.
What is the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund?
Okay, so the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund is actually an account to be established that will house resources to deal with losses associated with natural disasters.
Okay.
That will enable the government to respond quickly and effectively in the aftermath of a natural disaster.
So, Mr. Francis, when will this fund become accessible?
Okay, so the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, we're aiming to have the relevant amendment to the Financial Administration and Audit Act submitted to Parliament by the end of December 2023. At that time as well, we are aiming to have the financial regulations that will govern the transaction relating to the fund finalized and approved. So we expect that the fund should become operationalized sometime after the end of December 2023.
That's good news. So, Mr. Francis, in the event of an emergency, a devastating disaster, how quickly will we be able to access this fund?
All right, so we know that it is important to be able to mobilize funds as quickly as possible after you have had a natural disaster event that would have resulted in significant losses.
Yes.
And so the fund is expected to, the monies from the fund are expected to be disbursed within a very short period of time. Now, the reserve fund, one of the proposals is that the fund should be accessed only if the natural disaster would have impacted the country with damages exceeding 1.5% of GDP. And so what it will require is the fiscal commissioner to ascertain the impact of the disaster. And then once that has been concluded, the process to get the funds from the account will begin. And that process is expected to go pretty quickly. It will take the same process as would a normal warrant. So the Public Expenditure Division would issue a warrant. Auditor General would do their audit. The various ministries and departments would put in their request for the monies to be expended, and then Auditor General will have the money disbursed to the accounts for the spending to take place. So that process is expected to be short within say 10 to 15 days or less.
But some would say that's not really short, 10 to 15 days after a disaster?
The fact is that it will take a little while for the assessment of the impact.
Okay.
So that is going to be what is likely to consume most of the time prior to the disbursement of the fund. But no doubt, the funds are going to be disbursed in a relatively short time.
So how prepared would you say we are with this fund now?
We are much better prepared than we would have been certainly a decade ago, 5 years ago. This fund is expected to be capitalized from the national budget up to $10 billion. But not only will it hold monies capitalized from the budget, the fund is proposed to also house those payments that would have been remitted from the other policies that we currently have for disaster risk financing. So when the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility pays out with a triggering event, those funds are expected to be paid into the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund. We're talking about the catastrophe bond. If a payment is made, then it will also go to that account. So we are much better prepared, I'd say, relative to where we would have been a few years ago.
So to be clear, the NNDRF is different from the catastrophe bond?
It is different. So the catastrophe bond is an instrument that would have been issued in the international capital market that allow us to draw down up to US $185 million. In the event of a triggering event, the monies are paid out and are utilized to finance response and reconstructive activities. Reconstruction activities, in terms of the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund. As I said, first it will be capitalized by monies to be allocated from the budget, and then where payments are made based on the current instruments that we have available, those will also go into the Disaster Reserve Fund. So there are two separate instruments, except that one of them, when it pays out, it will be held in the account of the National Disaster Reserve Fund.
Okay, now I get you, Mr. Francis. So before we go, quickly, tell us 3 things that we need to remember about the NNDRF.
Okay, so the first thing I want us to remember is that the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund is just one of a number of instruments that we have in terms of disaster risk financing. So we have the Natural Disaster Fund, we have the catastrophe bond, we have the contingent credit facility with the IDB, we have risk policies with the insurance policies with the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. So it is just one of the instruments that we have in our suite of instruments for disaster risk financing. The second thing is that the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund will be capitalized from the budget in addition to holding resources that are made available when a triggering event would have resulted in a payout from one of the other instruments that we have available. And the last thing I'd want to say is the National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund is certainly putting Jamaica in a better position to be able to respond quickly and effectively to natural disasters when they do occur.
I'm happy to hear that, Mr. Francis. On that note, thank you for being on our program today.
It was a pleasure to be here.
And thank you for joining us on this episode of Finance Matters. Remember to follow us on social media at MOF Jamaica and tune in next week as we continue to demystify the economic and fiscal policies and initiatives implemented by the government to empower Jamaicans as we chart a path to Jamaica's economic prosperity.